And the next presenter is Dr. Cristina Rodriguez-Acosta. She is the Interregional Advisor, Program Management and Capacity Development Unit in the Public Institution and Digital Government Division of the UN DESA. Again, her bio is in the information booklet around this webinar, and she will also be sharing her presentation with her colleague, Mr. Gregory McGann, who is the Program Management Assistant with the same division. And I'm learning he is a lecturer with Google in machine learning as well. So Cristina and Gregory, over to you both.
Thank you, Lois, for that generous introduction, and thank you for everyone who's joining us. Let me share my screen and make sure that you're all looking at the same. No, can you see my screen, or what is it sharing? No. Yeah.
We saw your screen, but not the presentation.
Yeah, let me just make sure that. Can you see it now?
Yes, we can.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you, Mariosa, for your presentation on AI, because we know that, when we're talking about innovation, digital government, and changing mindsets, nowadays AI is the topic of the moment. Everybody's talking about AI. But innovation, is more than just the use of AI and technologies in government, and sometimes innovation can just be a change in the way we're doing things. So I want to comment on my presentation about innovation and the importance of having an innovation or experimental mindset. For those who attended the first webinar where Dr. Adriana Alberti talked about changing mindset, we mentioned the importance of changing our mindset, changing the way we approach issues and problems in the public sector to deliver better public services. So in this presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about what is innovation mindset and why is it important to have it in the public sector, so we can provide better services to the people, which at the end of the day is the most important role and job that the public sector has. So what is innovation? We know there are many different definitions about innovation. What does it mean to innovate? But I think that I want you to think about innovation, about the generation and implementation of valuable new ideas. We don't have to reinvent the wheel each time, but we can look at complex problems with a different approach, with a more collaborative approach, and find new ways of doing things. So when we're talking about innovation, we're talking about creating public value and doing things in a different way, being creative, but the creativity must be linked to action. We cannot just stay in the mind of thinking this is a great idea and this is the way we're going to change. We actually need to do it. So digital transformation requires new skills and new mindsets. We know that nowadays technology is offering us a great variety of ways of innovate, different ways of approaching problems, but that requires a change of mindsets. As Maria Elsa mentioned, the public sector faces very challenging issues when it comes to innovation because of the culture of the organizations, because of resistance to change. So it's important to think about new skills and new mindsets, and how do we upskill and reskill the public sector for innovation. So what is an innovation mindset? What does it mean to have an innovative or experimental mindset for the public sector? And this is part of the UN DESA framework that my colleague Adriana presented in the previous webinar. So when an innovation or experimental mindset is one that has as a basic belief that human capacities are not fixed, that we can change, and that we all have the ability to learn and to continue to change. Though the attitude that such a public employee or a public sector civil servant employee would have is an attitude of a risk taker, somebody who's eager to experiment, who's a problem solver, who's resilient, who's creative, and who's willing to change and try things. So the competencies that we're looking for are those of people who can do strategic problem solving, who can take a broad approach, who can think strategically in not just a short term, but a long term. We're also looking for people who are creative and who are not afraid to innovate. So these are some of the basic competencies that we're looking to instill in the public sector so we can have an innovative or experimental mindset. It doesn't mean that those who are already in the public sector don't have it. It's that we need to change the way we approach problems and the way we think about it so we can allow for these values and these attitudes that many of us have and that most of us have to flourish, to be able to implement them. An innovation mindset, though, is then based in a methodology, broadly speaking, that thrives in teamwork, in collaboration. You're willing to work together with others. We're open to working together in teamworks. We promote an environment in the public sector that allows for collaboration and cooperation, not just within our own department, but within departments, within different levels of government. We're also looking for an attitude, for a mindset that promotes the user, that is centric an approach, as Maria Elsa mentioned. We have the citizens, we have the people we're providing the services to in the center of our concerns. They are the way we work, and we propose solutions or innovations that are centered on their needs. And this requires, of course, a lot of communicating, a lot of different techniques that exist for meeting the needs, for understanding where the real needs of the citizens, of the residents, and not just what we think are the needs. It also requires co-creation. We're willing to co-create not only with the citizens, with the residents, but also with academia, with the private sector, with many different stakeholders. We're also willing to work on prototyping solutions. We do not think of this is the final product, this is the final solution, and we work towards the end. We work in an experimental mindset. We're working in small steps. We propose a first type of solution, we prototype it, we test it, we try it, and if it doesn't work, we will go back to the basics and start again. That's why another element that is important in an innovation mindset has to do with this point of failing frequently, learning and moving on. It's not that we look for failure, but we're willing to accept failure as a learning methodology and as a way to move forward. And I think we can all agree that this is probably one of the biggest challenges we have in the public sector, because it's very difficult to deal with failure in the public sector because we're not supposed to fail. So this requires a change of mindset and a different attitude in the way we work. So what is then a digital mindset? This is also based on the UN DESA digital competencies frameworks and in a toolkit that we have developed on innovation and digital mindset that is available to all of you. So the belief in a digital mindset, as Maria Elsa had also mentioned, has to do with the belief that we can leverage digital technologies, that we can leverage technologies to provide better challenges, to provide better solutions to challenges in the public sector. So the attitude is not only that we can use and support governance using technology, but we're also aware of the risks of using technology. The competencies is not only the technical stuff, understanding data, understanding the uses of data, understanding the technologies, but also keeping abreast of those challenges and the knowledge that is out there, but also how we can best apply it to our work. Not everyone has to use artificial intelligence. Not everyone has to be an expert in Python language or in coding. But we all need to understand, what does digital technology means in our line of work? Do we have the skills, the necessary skills, and how do we prepare the public sector for that? So the digital mindset, it's a learning mindset, it's a mentality, it's an experience of constantly being, learning, and knowing what are some of the challenges that we face when it comes to the implementation on digital transformation. So we all know that the capacity to innovate varies tremendously between countries. This was mentioned also in the previous presentation. That has to do a lot with the context in which we're working, with the resources available. And we also know that many countries around the world, even the most developed, are still facing challenges when it comes to effectively using digital technologies and how to adapt the public sector to the use of digital technologies and what it means to use digital technology or promoting innovation through digital technologies. But we can say that there are five main principles when we're talking about innovation in public services that have to do with access, quality, being inclusive and responsiveness, people-driven transparent and accountable. So when we're talking about innovation in the public sector, we are looking for innovations that broaden the access of services to the people. It's not just the group, but the whole of society. We're also looking for programs in innovation that, of course, improve the quality of those services, that are inclusive to the most vulnerable, to all. No one is left behind. And they're also responsive to the needs, to the actual needs of our public, that are people-driven and that are personalized services. They respond to the needs of the groups, and those services are transparent and accountable. We know who is implementing it, we know who's accountable, and why we're doing it. We also talk about 6 key steps when we're talking about designing a roadmap for innovation and digital transformation. And this kind of repeats a little bit of what Maria Elsa mentioned, the importance of having a holistic approach, of looking at the whole of society and the whole of government when we're talking about innovation and digital transformation, and not just our silo or the area that we work. We're also highlighting the importance of system thinking of the global, of an overall strategy, a strategic framework. We should know where we're going and how we're getting there. We need to do a stakeholder analysis. We need to understand what are the role that other stakeholders can play, how can they support what we're doing, and how can we support their work as well. So it's co-creation, it's collaborative, this strategy, and of course the action. We need to plan the action and how we're going to get to where we go. There's some of the characteristics of those countries that are leading when it comes to in terms of innovation. And again, it has to do with system thinking, with having a clear vision of their policy making. There is a need, an understanding, and steps towards reorganizing institutions. It's not easy to collaborate, to co-create with other levels of government and across the government and with all of society. So the countries that are able to reorganize the institutions and to rethink the way they work are those who tend to be the most innovative or most advanced when it comes to digital transformation. It also requires a change in structures of the organizations within organizations as well. It requires a lot of openness and willingness to change and to try new things. Those changes in structures are accompanied by a change on culture and new skills, and this is very relevant to our topic of changing mindsets. We do require a change in mindsets, a change in attitudes and the way we work, so we can also prepare the public sector, the new skills that we need to promote innovation and digital transformation. The UN recognizes that every country can innovate and that technologies can facilitate innovation and that innovation breeds innovation. And there are a lot of public sector initiatives that are innovative and that can promote digital transformation, that can promote the provision of better services. So the UN has established the UN Public Service Awards, and I was just to very briefly mention it here. I encourage all of you to participate. This is done annually, and it's a recognition of initiatives around the world that in a way support innovation. When we see others innovating, we might be incentivized to innovate. So these are some of the winners from the 2022 UN PSA Awards. And we were actually looking for proposals from the Caribbean and winners. And I was able to find one from Dominica in 2011 on using technologies and better information for fisheries management. So I want to encourage all of you who are attending this webinar to think about this UN Public Service Awards and encourage you to look at innovations that you're already implementing and that could be a candidate for next year's awards. So I want to end with this last slide that has to do with what are some of the enablers for promoting digital skill, innovation, and changing mindsets in the public sector. Well, one of the biggest enablers, I think, is political commitment, is leadership. We need the support of our leaders. We can also be leaders from our jobs where we are to promote innovation, to promote a change of mindset that will be facilitating an environment of innovation and digital transformation. We need to support a culture of transformation for this leadership, investing in our human resources, in changing the capacity and the mindset of our human resources. We need to promote system thinking and synergies that allow for this complementarity in training policies and making sure that they are implemented. This change in organizational structures is also very important. Funding, of course, funding is always an issue. There never will be enough funding, but the appropriate funding needs to be there, and we need to make sure that we're using it in a proper and correct way. Thus, the comments on transparency and accountability. It is important to have the appropriate legislation and regulations at the national level, at the organizational level, so we can promote an environment of innovation. Failure, for example, requires of a change not only of mindset, but also in the regulations. There should be an acceptance to failure that is not always there in our rules. The involvement of all stakeholders is very important when we talk about an environment of innovation in the public sector and for digital transformation. We cannot stress enough the importance of monitoring, reporting, and evaluation processes of what we're doing when it comes to promoting innovation and digital transformation in the public sector. It's the bread and butter of what we're doing, and to be transparent and accountable to our citizens. And finally, we need to promote a skills-based approach to hiring and promotion. We need to move from just this rigid job descriptions and requirements for skills in the public sector, because innovation and digital transformation is flexible, requires more flexibility. We might not need a 4-year degree, university degree. We just may need certifications and trainings. This also requires a change in mindset from us and from the public sector in the way we approach innovation. So these are some of the basic enablers that we think are important when we're talking about innovation and digital transformation. As I mentioned, DESA has developed a series of toolkits that support the public sector in these topics, and I'll be happy to share in the chat the link to that as well. And with that, I'll thank you for your attention, and I will now give the floor to my colleague, Gregory McGannon, for his presentation on the emerging AI regulatory environment. Gregory, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Cristina. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. I think I've got around 5 minutes to do this. I'll do it very quickly. Next slide. Let's start off with the relative context of AI development. As we're all well aware, in the abstract, AI is improving very swiftly. You can see here several particular kind of modalities of AI: handwriting recognition, speech recognition, image recognition, reading comprehension, and the way in which there is a clear acceleration of capacities. The most important benchmark is the MMLU, which is the massive multitask language understanding benchmark, which was at around the best model in 2020 was BERT, which was at around 25% capacity, 25% of human level. And in 2023, Google released Gemini Ultra, which is at about 90%. So as you can see, it's quickly speeding up. And that's largely been achieved because of scale. And BERT was at around 125 million parameters, which is an approximation of a neural network size required to train it. And Gemini had about 1.7 trillion. So you can see the difference in scaling, which leads us on to the future slides. But there's clearly one of the additional context to this is that AI governance is substantially underfunded by comparison with AI technical development. So although we receive a distorted view of this, because often the public conversations are about regulation, but these are very typically people who are not actually working on it. The funded positions are for increasing capacity, not increasing governance. So there's a substantial gap in actual work hours between governance and AI, but that hasn't stopped people, as we'll see, putting forward draft legislation, and in the case of the European Union, actually drafting it. So next, please. Excuse me. Okay, so the essence of policy reactions to AI has focused on dealing with each separate part of what we consider to be the supply chain, as it were, of artificial intelligence. So that starts off with the infrastructure, which would be the hardware and the servers on which AI operates, and then after that the models and the model training, and then finally the applications. So ChatGPT, for instance, is an application. Behind the application is the model, which is either GPT 3.5 or GPT-4 Turbo at the moment. And then the infrastructure is Microsoft Azure. So there are these three different levels, and each of the comprehensive legislation has to deal separately with each one of these levels. And in each of these case studies, there's actually quite a marked divergence between how they deal with each one of these things: infrastructure, models, and applications. Okay, let's go to the next. So the European Union already has by far the most developed regulatory environment for artificial intelligence, machine learning, and digital services. It already has 3 pieces of core legislation involving digital services, which are the Digital Services Act, the Digital Markets Act, and the GDPR. Broadly speaking, the Digital Services Act deals with the applications that already existed, such as the models used by Google and Microsoft and now OpenAI. The Digital Markets Act deals with competitive practices and monopolistic practices which are perceived to be in place, which such as like gatekeeping. So the idea that there would be that there's a market distortion happening because certain companies control too much of the market. And finally, the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which deals with personal data privacy. And this has relevance for AI already because the models are trained on data, and they are generally operated by firms that are already bound by the regulation of the Digital Services Act and the Digital Markets Act. Next. So this year, the European Union introduced the AI Act, which is a risk-based approach, and they delineate risk into unacceptable risk, limited risk, minimal risk, and high risk. So this is the discourse around the AI Act has largely been its impact on business, but the minimal risk, which is not regulated at any sort of prohibitive level, actually includes chatbots and recommender systems, which at the moment create around 3/4 of all actual value added in artificial intelligence. The high risk categories are primarily focused on law enforcement, education, healthcare, and the banned categories are those which involve national security, and for example, biometric use checking with artificial intelligence, although importantly, there is actually a carve out for urgent national security matters. With regard to the breakdown of the tech stack, the infrastructure, there's actually it's not really much talk about the infrastructure in the AI Act, which is important when we compare it with the United States, but the environmental impact is noted. So for example, approximately one report noted that in the next 3 years, AI servers will consume about the electricity capacity every year of Sweden. So it's clearly, but infrastructure has a broader environmental impact, and that was noted in the AI Act. So that's being monitored. Models, it governs the data usage and governance processes. So when models are being trained, there's a relatively opaque process at the beginning, which is the initial training, which we still can't easily decompose at a technical level, so we can't govern it easily. We can govern the data input, and then at the later stage, we have something called reinforcement learning from human feedback, which is surveillable. So at two stages, the input stage and then the alignment stage, which is the reinforcement learning of human feedback, there is a opportunity for governance, and that is noted in the AI Act. Applications. So this is really the focus of the EU's legislation. So they are focused on the actual usage of AI rather than the training or the infrastructure. And so it is here that the legislation is important. It's about bringing something to market, and it is about the impacts on consumers and other members of the public. It should be noted that there is a noted distinction between proprietary AI, which is more regulated, and open source AI. So open source AI has a significant carve out in the AI Act, which indicates that if you share your code that produced your model, which is what we call open source, open weighting. So we release the weights, which is basically the breakdown of a neural network. You are released from many of these obligations. So then it becomes that is meant to incentivize a more open environment, more transparent environment. Next. The United States has taken a markedly different approach. Even from its existing legislation, which I won't explain in detail, but the existing legislation is primarily infrastructure focused and national security focused. So it's deals with the way in which it impacts, way in which applications currently of AI impact core national priorities. So that's slightly different from the EU approach, which doesn't really consider infrastructure. Next. So there is no comprehensive AI Act in the process of being drafted in the United States. There's no congressional process at the moment, but there was an executive order issued by the Biden-Harris White House, which was, as I said, markedly different in its intense focus on critical infrastructure, cloud infrastructure, and its usage of the Defense Production Act in both infrastructure and models, and it is unambiguously focused on preventing AI falling into the hands of what it perceives to be bad actors internationally. There is much less emphasis than in the AI Act on applications for consumers. So this is primarily focused on regulating cloud computing, regulating data provision. So where is data stored? This is actually part of the discussion currently about the banning of TikTok. Where is data stored, and where are those servers monitored? Next. So this is an example of final example of infrastructure of regulation that was being considered. India proposed at the end of last year some draft legislation on AI capabilities, and it didn't really talk about infrastructure, which is unsurprising because it doesn't have any of the major cloud providers domestically, but it was considered to be the most robust action on models because it required the pre-registering of models before deployment. Neither the EU nor the US has considered that. So it would have required, for example, OpenAI to pre-register ChatGPT before it was deployed. And this would apply even to open source models. So, but actually, as a result of the reception, this was actually dropped, and there is now no forthcoming legislation on artificial intelligence in India. So I hope this has provided a whistle-stop tour of the basic contours of artificial intelligence legislation in the world.
Thank you so much, Gregory and Christina. Man, I have so many questions. So much food for thought, but we know we're going to come to